Have you ever had a crisis of meaning? Have you ever been like paralyzed by a choice? Maybe suffered that crazy thing called dread or angst? Well, you're in luck. Today we're going to talk about existential despair. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Dan, with my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
So you came up with the topic of existential despair. Do you
I was,
feeling despair?
dude, I was thinking about it because the whole course of life is just messed up nowadays. It's like the whole goal of everything that you do is just accumulate more money. And then you get the more money and it doesn't fulfill anything at all. And it's just
Yeah.
like this endless hedonic treadmill that never ends.
Dude, that's
And there's no
humanity.
meaning.
It's humanity,
Yeah.
dude. No meaning. Dude, I was just talking, it's funny, we were talking last night because Anna was like, she was like, God, they're putting AI in everything. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like she was looking at a yoga mat that had AI in it, right? Like what could that possibly serve?
Oh my
But
God.
I was like, don't you see the progression that they're trying to do? They're trying to put AI in these things. Then you're gonna have like a robot vacuum that talks to you and like tells you the weather. And eventually we're gonna work up to Android so we can have slaves. And it's like crazy, but that's like the progression. Like really. It's insane.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then we're gonna have even less meaning because then we're not gonna have work. And it's like we do these things that like are there's all these things that we produce that are so beneficial, but we use them in ways or we end up doing things with them that just make them like devoid, I think, or strips us of purpose, which I think is dangerous.
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's like I I was thinking about it also about these big freaking dinosaurs of people who just accumulate as much money as they can. And it's not like they're doing it back in the Henry Ford type of fashion where he paid his employees the highest that the market could bear so that they wouldn't go anywhere else. They're like literally paying their employees the least possible so that they can barely survive and they have to go get another job somewhere else. And it's just creating this almost unlivable reality.
It is. Oh, it absolutely is, dude. I mean, like, I forget what the exact number is because when it's like it's like less than 20 people have the accumulated wealth of the bottom like 95% of people or something. And that's not far off from the actual fact. I forget what the actual number is, but that's pretty close. Like it's
Mhm.
absurd when you think about it. Like
Yeah.
there's like almost like 8 billion people or something. Like think about
hmm
that. I'm not talking about just the US. We're talking about the globally. Like it's just
Yeah. I think
ridiculous.
I think people need to start watching Les Miserables again and learn about the
French
French
Revolution, I
Revolution.
know.
Yeah, right?
They were like, we are not messing around. We're cutting all their heads off. No, after this, like we might get some innocent people, but that's okay. Cover our
Yeah.
bases, right?
Remember
Yeah,
George Michael when he wants to get a French passport, he's like, I like the way they think.
yeah.
Like cousin dangereux. Anyways.
It is.
Yeah,
It's
so
no.
it's
I
a
was gonna.
it's a tricky thing.
Well, it is because we make meaning. Nothing's meaningful in itself or inherently. I mean, I don't think so. I think we
But
make
also
meaning.
the things that gave us pleasure in a healthy way have all been stripped away,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
essentially. Like
this
a
is
while back, you were hungry and then you had to go and find some food or hunt some food or something. And the process of that was like a game that you played, and then it had the ultimate payoff because you would get to quench
yeah.
that hunger at the end. Now you just push a button on an app, it gets flown to your house, and then you're just like, okay, I'll
Well,
just eat way too much food.
do you know like Jean-Paul Sartre was like he had a falling out with Camus because Sartre was like very much into like Marxist humanism or humanist Marxist, however I forget the phrasing is. But anyway, um, and it's funny like Marx, that's what he was worried about in Das Kapital. That's what he talks about is like as when we transition from like doing things ourselves, creating stuff to selling our labor, we lost something that was like a crucial part of what gave our life meaning and value and purpose, which was solving problems, creating things on our own, realizing our powers in the world, and being connected to our labor through production. Like, there's a difference when, when you make something yourself, it feels good. It's unique. It's for you. But when you just go to work and, you do one little part of this large thing, it's like busy work. It's like, it's hard to see why you're even bothering. Or, when you have to work three jobs and you still can't even pay your bills, and then you're seeing on social media people with these $300 shoes and $500 million yachts and stuff. It's like, how can you even wrap your head around that?
Well, the only redeeming quality of that is that I know from from meeting enough of them that they're all like miserable and suicidally depressed.
This is the funny thing too, though. It's not like they're even happy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, God, if they were happy, at least that'd be something. You know,
Hmm.
like at least somebody figured it out. But like that's what cracks me up the most. It's like they don't even know what the hell. Like people just I think people make this assumption that if you have more money and stuff, you must know more. You must, you know what I mean? But you don't. Just like just like sitting on the Supreme Court does not mean you're smart or a good judge.
No,
Like at all. Doesn't mean
no.
anything.
It just means
But
that you're good at accumulating money. It
or
doesn't
you're good,
mean,
yeah, or you're good at
yeah, it
networking or
doesn't mean you're
whatever. Like
smarter, doesn't mean you're worth any more, nothing. Yeah.
no, and that's I think people forget this and like because we're taught to make all these comparisons. And I think this makes that existential like despair and just dread worse too, because I think it's like, when the existentialists talk about like that angst and that dread, focusing on that part of it, it's like when you're faced with decisions, that fear of like making the right decision for you, right? Like, and I felt that. I know you have too, right? Like when we were contemplating quitting our old jobs and switching careers, like that was a
Hmm.
scary moment because it's like your face is like, one, if I make this choice and switch careers and it's wrong, I'm screwed, right? There's that fear that I'm like throwing away all this stuff that I already built. On the other hand, it's like if I don't make that choice and stay, I'm already miserable, so I'm gonna be more miserable. It's like, yeah, that's that kind of paralyzing fear that can cause you not to make a decision because you realize like this defines me. It's
Hmm.
really serious. And I think so it is very hard to kind of like, I don't know, I think it gets harder and harder to make decisions when meaning is so just devoid of everything, just
Yeah,
gone
it's
from
nebulous.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah, when there's no clear yes, which
Yeah.
is a really
Yeah.
tricky thing because a lot of times recently there's no clear yes. And then here's another thing. So like aside from life being having I don't know, whatever. But
Whatever it is.
whatever it is. So I like now there's like this anxiety epidemic sweeping across the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And I heard recently that uh unconscious anger, oftentimes in the form of rage, will manifest as anxiety.
I could totally see that though.
And
People are
and like,
pissed, dude. Like,
dude, and like go figure. This is like probably 20, 30 years after political correctness started. When all of a sudden you couldn't think
oh,
the way you wanted, you couldn't be the way you wanted, all of a sudden you had to stifle everything that was natural to you to appeal to everyone in humanity. And that causes insane unconscious anger.
not only that, but what about the fact that like you have generations of people, especially in like our country, who have done what they were told to do that would make them successful, go to college, come out with egregious debt that they can't even afford, faced with a world where they can't even buy a house, get a car, can't even do the things that their parents could do when they were like 10 years younger than them. Like,
Hmm.
I think that's a huge part of it is like we've made it so hard. We've made it so unnecessarily hard to live when it should be the easiest time to live. Because it meant, and that's the weird, and that's also I think the thing that's like causes so much anxiety and also despair is like on the one side, it's like it is the easiest time to live. Like you can
Hmm.
see that. Like, we have healthcare, all this stuff that's like good. On the other
But
hand,
is
it's
it
like
really living?
yeah, exactly. And I think that's the other side of it. This anxiety is coming up because people just like, you know, I don't know. I think back in the day, like we didn't have so much ongoing stress in our lives. Like we created so much stress with communication, with instant access to things, and like all this that I think,
Well, also just
we
the
don't know how to
spare
deal with
time
it.
that we have. Like
Yeah.
even though people are working two jobs, it's they're not actually working most of the time. And like there's that saying, the idle hands are the devil's plaything. Like,
Yeah.
people are only miserable when they have enough time to think about if they are miserable. And so I think that's part of it too, because there's just so much time and
Well, and it's so easy to just waste time scrolling, looking at things, looking at people that have more than you, or that presumably do, because it's like half of it's. I mean, like I love when you see stuff on like YouTube influencers and stuff where like they're renting all this crap to appear a certain way, but
well,
they really
that's what started the whole freaking craze. Ty Lopez in his garage,
yeah,
he's like, "This is my Lamborghini, but this
yeah,
isn't the most important thing. These are my books."
yeah,
And he rented the Lamborghini and probably rented the freaking books.
right. Or you went to like one of those
Hmm.
free book drops and just took them.
Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
right.
Yes, I mean, I don't know. how do you deal with this though? Because this is actually, it was funny when you messaged me this topic the other day. Like it was funny because I was just talking to Anna about this because like we were both just talking about this, like how like it's so hard sometimes to like feel optimistic about the future or to like to even like think that like the things you're doing are gonna pay off because like it just seems like everything is aimed to rip you off now, to
Hmm.
put you down, like and like it so it is really difficult to see that. So like what do you do when you're faced with this despair and like
Yeah, I've been struggling with it a lot this past week because, like, you do all this stuff that you're supposed to do, and eventually you get to where you're supposed to be secure and whatever. But it's like you never feel freaking secure because it's like, well, there could be another financial collapse. The bank could just lose all your money and be like, hey, sorry.
well
And
because that's all an illusion because you can only do what you can for yourself. You can't control all that stuff, right? So
yeah,
it's like you can do your best to sell yourself up as best as you can, but like I mean, there could be like you could have your money in something and it could be gone the next day. I remember in 2008.
hmm,
Remember when people lost their retirement funds like entirely?
yeah,
Like that was insane. And like
yeah,
so like it could all go away in an instant. So like yeah, I mean there is that. Like you can only
yeah,
prepare
like
so
freaking
much.
Enron.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, they
why
just
that's why
stole
we
everything.
really do need a French Revolution. Like this whole thing against cruel and unusual punishment. I think we
Yeah.
should reinstate cruel and unusual punishment for maybe like 10 years to just get people to stop acting so messed up. And then eventually,
Especially like these
like,
these uh these business majors.
yeah, especially, yeah, exactly. The white collar crime, like take care of that for 10 years, like clean stuff up to where people actually live a life of value and
Yeah.
virtue and stuff like that. And then, yeah, we can go back to no cruel
Well,
and
it's
unusual
like, dude,
punishment.
like I mean, like, come on, like the fact that like God, when I was like adjuncting, making, you know, not that much money, and I was paying more taxes than Bezos. It's like, and
Hmm.
it's like, and yet, how much are they using the roads, infrastructure, all that stuff that they're destroying, and they're paying nothing. Like, so
Hmm.
it does seem really wildly unfair, and it's hard. I think Camus was onto something though when he talks about absurdity, because like, you know, this world is a construct. It's something we made up. It's only as
Hmm.
meaningful as we make it. And, I think sometimes it is important just to like see it as absurd and realize that like it is absurd. Like you can only create meaning for yourself so much. And the world is always going to be absurd. The human condition is only going to be absurd. We can ask the universe as much as we want, why? It's never going to respond. Like, and I think there is something to that, that like maybe is that the right response? Just like, this is absurd. I'll just do the best I can for myself and do what's right for me because there's nothing else I can do, you know?
Yeah. It's a really tricky question. I have no idea how to deal with existential despair. Because I think you just
Well, they
have to
all give us
stop.
different responses too. That's funny.
Yeah.
They weren't in agreement.
Like I really think you need to go back to like you can't look at any type of modern goal of good living because that's all broken. Like it's just crazy how I think it was like
Because our modern
when
notion
Steve
of good
Jobs,
living is just like buying crap and
right.
having more crap and being able to compare ourselves to other people and be like, I got more stuff, therefore I'm more valuable.
Yeah. But it's like people are so hypocritical just because they're incentivized to gain as much money as quickly as possible. And so they do stuff that's just like madness. Like I
Yeah.
remember I was reading in Steve Jobs' biography how he like he invented the iPhone, the iPad, all this stuff, and yet he did not allow his children to use them. He sent his kids to a school where they were not allowed to use them. And like that's what a ton of people are doing in Silicon Valley. So like they're all creating this addictive, like super highly
Hmm.
addictive technology.
And won't let their kids
And
use
they're
them at all.
spreading it out to everyone all across the world. And then they're saying, not our children. No,
Yeah.
that's okay. And it's just like, what kind of hypocritical life do you live where you just like do that stuff to other people, but not to you?
Because you just don't care. And the funny thing
Hmm.
is, but I think this is where I think existentialism and stuff is important because at the end of the day, you live with that. I often wonder sometimes whether their misery, because all these people are miserable, isn't tied to unconsciously, kind of like self-hate or guilt and stuff for like,
Hmm.
because they know what they're doing. I don't care. You can say whatever you want. they have to be somewhat aware of what they're doing. Well, they definitely are. If they're not letting their kids on the freaking phones, they definitely are 100% aware of what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I do wonder that. And I think that's the other side of this, which is, like we have to live with ourselves, right? And like we live in the world we create, and I think that's a big part of this. So doing stuff more like that's aligned with our real values is way more important at the end of the day. And
Hmm.
that's the other funny thing. Like we also like created this world where like we tell people that they get all this crap as fast as they can. It's like I think I might have mentioned this before, but it's like I always laugh when I read things like about like science journals like having to retract stuff because there was like fraudulent stuff. It's like no kidding there
Oh,
was
awesome.
because all you've told people is you have to get A's, you have to do the best, but you've never told them that the work mattered. It just mattered what the results were. So it's like of course they're going to do that because that'll move them forward faster, right? And that's all that matters
Hmm.
is the results. Like yeah, I think we're too results oriented. That's part of the problem.
Hmm.
It is interesting.
Yeah. The yeah, I guess dealing with existential despair, you kind of have to start listening to yourself and
Yeah.
figuring out what to do with that.
You have to listen to yourself. I think like Nietzsche, for Nietzsche, it's like I think a lot more of like listening to yourself, knowing yourself, and like setting goals and achievements for yourself, right? Like giving yourselves purpose, literally, is one way to address it, right? For Camus, it's more of like a kind of almost pa it's like a recognition of the absurd and almost passive, like a realization that nothing you do will matter. So like
Hmm.
then nothing matters, therefore you can do whatever you want, right? Everything's permitted. So in that sense, it's like doing what's aligned with you. I think for all the existentialists, we get this realization that like, you can live however you want in the world. All you have to do is do it, right? The only thing
Hmm.
stopping you is you. So like, I think understanding that is also important. Like you can make changes in your life that can hopefully help with that emptiness of meaning and try and fill it with like meaning or values that work for you. But you have to find them. You have to be self-aware and it takes time. It's hard. So I think that's
Yeah.
the other frustration. There is no like 24-hour fix, right? This is like, dealing with it can take time and it can be very hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like it's one of those things where it can uh because it's so easy to become outcome focused, like results oriented. And you're like,
Oh yeah.
well, yeah, I'll fix everything with myself once I get to this thing that I have. And
Dude. Yeah, that is
and
like
it's
the famous thing, right? Like, oh, we'll get this once we have X, Y, and Z taken care of. Like when all this stuff's perfect, then we'll move on to the next thing. And it's like, well, it never's gonna be perfect.
yeah. Yeah, it's like you can gain the whole world, but what's the worth of it if you lose yourself in doing so? And it's kind of like I think maybe you had to again, this is just something that could work, but like maybe just trying to limit these newer types of things, like all these modern inventions, like limit them, go back to doing stuff old style. Maybe those people who like listen to vinyl records and like, do their own laundry by hand and
Yeah.
plant stuff in the backyard and have a chicken farm. Maybe they're onto something. Who knows?
Well, I mean, that's the funny thing is there's so many different examples of how to live, right? You still have monks, there's still some indigenous tribes living, in ways that are like for us very outdated, but that's still working for them. Like, like other than the encroachment of the, modern world on them, I guess. But, it's crazy. There's so many other ways that always fascinated me was like, we've made the world this way, but it could be totally different. Like, this doesn't have to be the way it is. But it's by default. Like, it was this way when we got here, so now it's this way kind of thing? Like,
Hmm.
it's kind of interesting when you think about that we can remake it into anything we wanted. And so you have to wonder, like, why this system? Because money's so funny because it's like it's such an empty thing. I think that's why people that like do start chasing it, they can't stop. Because there is no point at which you say, I have enough. I've reached my goal because guess what? You can always go higher. There's always somebody else that has more. You can always raise
Hmm.
the bar. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
an
and
unending
you're oh, and
treadmill.
no matter how much money you have, there's always going to be moments where you feel miserable. There's always going to be moments where you feel not good enough, and then you're like, oh well, that must just be because they have more money. If I had
Yeah.
that, then I wouldn't feel this. So let's go do that.
Well, and it's like every famous person has ever said, right? The money also doesn't solve your problems. That's the funny thing.
Mm-mm.
It solves certain specific problems. Other than that, it doesn't solve anything. It doesn't fix
Wow,
you, you know?
man.
Yeah. It's
And it
crazy.
gives you more problems. Like I think it's pretty crazy how like back maybe in the 90s there was that more money, more problems song. And people still they're just like, no, more money is less problems. And it's like, nah, maybe not.
Maybe not, right? It changes a lot of things, especially in a world where everything's valued based on money.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Existential. Did we said we were going to talk about something else in this existential despair episode? You remember what it was? Something that you were just talking about.
Oh,
Uh,
oh, yeah. I think that was in the oh, that was I was talking about the goals thing, just because that was interesting.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can mention that. That
This could be another way to not have
actually, this
some
is a helpful
despair.
method. Yeah, is like when you're trying to like, we've both done this a lot. When you're trying to like change things or make the right decision, like both of us have a habit of writing down goals in journals, and like making lists. Because I think it is a helpful way. They say like, I've always read that like you're 40% more likely to accomplish things if you write them down. But I was laughing because I had messaged you the other night because I have like a planner and I happened to stumble upon I had made a list in the back of goals I wanted to accomplish for like programming because this is back when we were learning. It was like probably a couple of years ago. And I hadn't looked at it again. I just forgot it was there. And I found it and they were all completed. And I was like, it's kind of funny because like the more I do that, the more I write down lists of things I want to accomplish, which gives my life meaning because it gives me purpose. It's funny that I notice like the more it creates like a little mini commitment in my brain that I don't even realize is there. And like it just gets done. It's kind of cool how that works out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I mean, that's probably like the closest thing you could actually do to doing something for your own survival is giving yourself goals that are valuable for yourself and then ticking them off.
Yeah. It's like one of the hardest things to do living in this world, I think, because like that impulse to conform is so strong, right? To be like everybody else. And I think like this one thing I always loved about the existentialists is they all point out like it is hard to be yourself. That's like one of the hardest
Hmm.
things to do because it means being alone. Because anytime you interact with other people, they want you to be like them. They want you to conform. They want you to do these things. So it's like it is really hard to be like just an individual. And I think that's why so many people are struggling with anxiety, depression, like all these factors that we've been talking about. And it's like really hard to like break free of that. So I think the only way is to like start focusing on yourself. Like, is this really right for me? Why am I doing this? Am I doing it for me or for other people? Why do I feel obliged to do these things? Like, are they my obligations or are they obligations that people are placing on me? Like, start thinking in those terms and try and figure out like what life do I really want?
Yeah. When I was experiencing some of the existential despair the other day, it was pretty crazy like to try to imagine other people having as terrible feelings as I was having at that moment.
Yeah.
Because everybody else looked like they had, no problems whatsoever, but you can't tell from looking at other people, and that's the tricky part.
Well, that's the funny thing, right? Because we've all been trained that when we're out in the world to put that mask on so no one can read us because for like lots of reasons, right? Because one, it's deemed, you know, it's not etiquette and not part of the norms to like express that stuff. I think it's also been damaging to us, you know? Think
Hmm.
about it. How often do you have like real conversations with people about things that really matter? Like,
Hmm.
it's like
Yeah, rarely with you,
yeah,
but
exactly,
yeah.
right? With very few people. That's what I mean. Like, and
Yeah.
people are uncomfortable about it. I think this is one of the other things that's difficult when you're trying, like when you're struggling with this, is like having somebody to talk to can be so helpful. But when you only have yourself, it's really hard. So like journaling is a very good method to kind of get that out there and have a conversation or a dialogue, even with
Hmm.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Anything else you want to
Well,
add?
no,
All
that's
right.
all.
Well, there you have it. Existential dread. I mean, I think, or despair, which is similar anyway. I think it is hard. It's going to be with us. But if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Even leave a review. You can check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Until then, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.